What's up, everybody? Nick O'Dwyer back with you for the 10th inning, giving you another episode of This Day in Sports History. In yesterday's episode, we saw the greatest clay tennis player of all time, Rafael Nadal, add to his record with his 11th French Open victory in 2018. We do have some more Rafael Nadal to get into today, but we also have a lot of other things. So if you all enjoy this video, leave a like on it. If you liked what you see and you're new to the channel and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Without further ado, let's get into it. This Day in Sports History. We start out today in 1903 at the British Open, and Harry Vardon won his 4th Open title and the 6th of 7 overall majors, 6 strokes ahead of his younger brother, Tom Vardon. 6 years later in 1909, we stick with the British Open, and J.H. Taylor wins the championship for a 4th time. Taylor would win, being 6 strokes ahead of runners-up Tom Ball and James Braid. Then in 1919, we saw the first Triple Crown winner. Even though the term Triple Crown wasn't coined back then, he was the first Triple Crown winner. Sir Barton won the 51st running of the Belmont in 2 minutes 17.6 seconds. The first time a horse would end up winning the Kentucky Derby, Preakness Stakes, and the Belmont in the same calendar year. Very few horses have joined him in the quest of Triple Crown, but Sir Barton will always be remembered as the first to do it. Now we move up to 1938, and we have 4 separate events to get into. We start off at the US Open, when Ralph Guldahl won back-to-back Open titles and the second of 3 overall majors, 6 strokes ahead of runner-up Dick Metz. Then we move to the French Championships. On the men's side, Don Budge defeated Roderick Menzel 6-3, 6-2, 6-4 in straight sets. This would be the second leg of Budge's Grand Slam in 38 and the 4th of 6 overall major titles. Then on the women's side, Simone Matthew defeated Nellie Adamson 6-0, 6-3 in straight sets. This would be the first of 2 French victories and the first of 2 overall major victories on the singles side. Then we move to Major League Baseball, and the Cincinnati Reds pitcher Johnny Vandermeer no-hit the Boston Braves in the 3-0 victory. Vandermeer, 9 innings pitched, 3 walks allowed, 4 strikeouts on the day. Now we move up 11 years to the 1949 US Open, which saw Kerry Middlecroft with a score of 2 over win the first of 2 Open titles and 3 majors, winning 1 stroke ahead of Clayton Hefner and Sam Snead for the US Open victory. 1 year later in 1950, we're right back to the US Open, the 50th edition of the US Open, and we saw Ben Hogan, only 16 months off of a car accident. Ben Hogan, with a score of 6 over, defeated Lloyd Magrum by 4 shots and George Fazio by 6 in an 18-hole playoff. This would be the second of 4 US Open victories for Hogan, and overall Hogan would end up with 9 major victories in his career. 9 years later in 1959, we stick with the US Open and we have some history. Charles Sifford became the first African American to play in a US Open golf tournament. It really wouldn't go his way during the tournament. He would end up tied for 30 seconds, but it was a step in the right direction, a step for equality all around. Now we move up to the 1972 LPGA Championship, which saw Kathy Ahern with a score of 1 over win her only major title, 6 strokes ahead of runner-up Jane Blaylock. Also in 1972, we saw Greg and Jim Nettles become the 10th pair of brothers to hit a home run in the same game. Jim hit his home run in the top of the 6th inning for the Twins, and Greg hit his in the bottom of the 7th for the Indians. The Twins would end up winning, though, 5-3 in the game. 5 years later in 1977, at the 109th running of the Belmont Stakes, Seattle Slew won in 2 minutes, 29.6 seconds. Slew would become the first horse to win the Triple Crown as an undefeated horse. Later, he would be joined by Justify. Slew also became the 10th Triple Crown winner of 13 overall. 1 year later in 1978 at the LPGA Championship, Nancy Lopez with a score of 13 under won 6 strokes ahead of runner-up Amy Alcott. This would be the first of 3 major victories for Lopez in her career. At the same time, over at the French Open on the men's side, Bjorn Borg wins his 3rd French title of 6 and the 5th of 11 major victories, defeating Guillermo Villa 6-1, 6-1, 6-3 in straight sets. 1 year later in 1979, we stick with the French Open on the men's side, and Bjorn Borg wins the second of 4 straight French titles and 6 overall. Borg defeated Victor Pecci 6-3, 6-1, 6-7, 6-4 in 4 sets on the day. 3 years later in 1982, we go to boxing, and the heavyweight champion Larry Holmes won via technical knockout over Gary Cooney in 13 to retain the boxing title. 1 year later, in 1983, we see a high jump world record. Zhu Zhenhua of China set a new world record at 7 feet 9 1/4 inches. He would end up breaking his own record later that year. 5 years later at the 1988 Curtis Cup, the 25th edition of the Curtis Cup, the British Isles of Great Britain and Ireland ended up defeating the US 11-7. This would be the 4th victory for the British Isles in the Curtis Cup. Now we move up to the 1989 French Open on the men's final. Michael Chang wins his only career Grand Slam title, defeating Stefan Edberg 6-1, 3-6, 4-6, 6-4, 6-2. At only 17 years and 100 days old, Chang became the youngest male to win a Grand Slam singles title. 1 year later in 1990, Nolan Ryan, pitching for the Texas Rangers, threw his 6th no-hitter of his career, defeating the Oakland Athletics 5-0. Ryan became the oldest player to throw a no-hitter, and he would be the only player in MLB history with 6 no-hitters. On the day, 9 innings pitched, 2 walks allowed, 14 strikeouts in the victory for Ryan. 5 years later in 1995, and we go to the French Open on the men's final, Thomas Muster defeated Michael Chang 7-5, 6-2, 6-4 for his only major singles title. Then we move up to 2000 and we stay at the French Open. On the men's side, Gustavo Kuerten wins his second French title of 3 overall majors, defeating Magnus Norman 6-2, 6-3, 2-6, 7-6. Move up to 2003 and we have another multi-man no-hitter take place, this time for the Houston Astros. The Astros ended up defeating the New York Yankees 8-0 on the day, and 6 different pitchers were used. Roy Oswalt went 1 inning on the start. Then Peter Monroe came in for 2 2/3. He would end up giving up 3 walks. Those would be the only walks of the day. Kurt Charlouse then came in for 1 1/3 inning. Brad Lidge threw 2. Octavio Dotel threw 1. Billy Wagner closed it out with 1 inning, giving the Astros the combined no-hitter and the 8-0 victory. 3 years later at the 2006 LPGA Championship, Sairi Pak with a score of 8 under won her 3rd title in the event and 5th major overall. To win this major, Pak had to go to a playoff hole against Carrie Webb, and she would end up defeating Webb on the first hole of the playoff. Also in 2006 at the French Open on the men's side, I told you we'd be seeing him today, Rafael Nadal won his 2nd straight French title, defeating Roger Federer 1-6, 6-1, 6-4, 7-6 in 4 sets. This would be the 2nd major of 19 overall on the singles side for Nadal. 6 years later in 2012, and we stick with the French Open, and guess who? Rafael Nadal defeated Novak Djokovic 6-4, 6-3, 2-6, 7-5 in 4 sets. This would be Nadal's 3rd straight French title and his 7th French title overall, and the 11th of 19 overall major victories. Also in 2012 at the Stanley Cup Finals, the Los Angeles Kings defeated the New Jersey Devils for a 4-2 series victory, 6-1. This would be the first Stanley Cup title in the Kings' 45-year history, with Jeff Carter and Trevor Lewis both scoring 2 goals in the Game 6 victory, and Drew Doughty, Mike Richards, and Dustin Brown all getting 2 assists in the 6-1 victory. 5 years later, we stick with the Stanley Cup in 2017, and we saw the Pittsburgh Penguins defeat the Nashville Predators for a 4-2 series victory, 2-0. This would mark back-to-back championships for the Pittsburgh Penguins. For the Penguins, Patrick Hornqvist scored with 2 minutes remaining in the game, and then Carl Hedlund added another goal. This one would be an empty netter with 14 seconds left on the clock, giving the Penguins the victory, giving them their back-to-back Stanley Cup titles. Finally, in 2017, we go back to the French Open final on the men's side, and Rafael Nadal once again wins the French Open, defeating Stan Wawrinka 6-2, 6-3, 6-1 in straight sets. Nadal would become the first man to win the French title 10 times, and this would be the 15th of 19 overall majors for Nadal. So there it is. That's what happened on this day in sports history. Did I leave anything out? If I did, let me know down in the comment section. If I mispronounced any names, I do apologize. I hope everyone's having a great day out there, and I will see you tomorrow for Nick Wire and the 10th inning.